quickly introduce myself. My name's Jonathan Teal. I am a strategic account executive working here at Alteryx. Today, we've brought together a partner with us, our partner of the year for 2023, Capitalize Analytics, to help show some capabilities around taking Alteryx and scaling the application at the enterprise level. So today, what we know many of our customers are looking to do is to better govern the workflows that they have. As you democratize analytics across your organization, more and more people are looking for ways to automate and orchestrate their workflows. And various different people may have been there for years, maybe on different versions. You want the ability to ensure that each of the users are using a specific version. You want to be able to manage your environments in a way that allows you to migrate workflows from one environment to another. You want to do bulk loading, and really to govern the workflows and do documentation. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing today is to bring together our team from Capitalize, who will be joining us today. I have my solutions engineer, Nick Smith, on as well. We'll be monitoring the chat, but Sean Mock and Christina McLucky will be here from Capitalize Analytics to show us workflow administration and management, a robust tool used by many organizations with large deployments to enable customers to better govern the workflows that they have. So, and to ensure better governance and documentation around the workflows that are deployed across the organization. It's a common theme that we're hearing from many of our customers is, with the vast explosion of data that's happening across their organization and the number of workflows that are being deployed, how do you manage things better? How do you make it easier? And today, our goal is to give you kind of an easy button. And so I'm going to go ahead and hand this presentation over to Sean from here. And we're going to spend most of our time looking within the tool and not a lot of slideware. So the goal here is to move fast and to give you everything that you need in a short period of time. And thank you for joining us on Valentine's Day. Hopefully we're able to spread the love a little bit today. So,
well, thank you guys. Appreciate everyone's time today. One of the things I want to do is just encourage you all, if you have questions, use the chat or the Q&A feature. Today, I am blessed to have Christina McLucky, one of the brains behind this product, with me. And so we'll try to answer whatever questions you have along the way, but also I'll try to save some time at the end to answer questions. Really just kind of level set why we're here. If you're here, at this point, you understand that Alteryx is really a highly flexible and powerful solution. Allows people of all different skill sets to be able to create business solutions. But with great power comes great responsibility. And, in order to really scale usage across an an enterprise or an empire, either one, governance is critical. So from the business user and business leader side, having some sort of process controls and then documentation of process is critical. If you're a system owner, understanding the performance of your environment, your server environment is important, and being able to have tools to also manage the different systems, meaning you're different if you have a dev or production environment. If you have auditors and you have maybe a third party auditor, or you have your workflows have to be SOX compliance, you're going to need things like audit documentations, tracking of version changes, things like that. And really, the question is like, why are we here as Capitalize talking about this? Well, that's workflow governance is something I think that we have spent a great deal of time in. And if you're wondering who Capitalize is and why we're here, we're actually a North American based software consultancy focused on analytics and BI, and we've been Alteryx. We've partnered closely with Alteryx, and we've been partner of the year many times. And really, we also develop our own products to help enhance or supplement what Alteryx has created, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. So again, we work with a lot of different softwares in a lot of different verticals, in a lot of different functions. But one area that we really are focused on is workflow lifecycle governance. It's one of our specialties. And today I'm going to show you Workflow Admin Manager. The way to think about it is I'd think about it like it's the mission control center for your Alteryx deployment. So you're going to be able to use it to have visibility into what your current status is. What's the state of your deployment, and how is it being used? How are workflows being used? But then it also acts as a solution or a tool to help you get to where you want to be. So maybe you're early on in the stages of developing a governance process. Well, Wham's going to help you sort of get your arms around where you're at, and then it's going to give you the functionality that isn't necessarily native to the Alteryx server, and it's going to give you additional functionality to help you manage those environments. Depending on where you sit in the business, it has a little something for everybody. So if you're up more on the business side, it's going to be able to provide you with things like audit documentations, which I'll show. It'll help you enforce workflow standards. From a system perspective, if you're a system administrator or a gallery administrator, it's going to give you the capability to do things like make mass changes to your gallery environment, or mass changes to workflows, be able to monitor the performance of your Alteryx server. And the way it works is, I should mention, we also have a desktop version that actually works with, let's say you're keeping your workflows instead, maybe a file directory or something like that. We have a desktop version. But what I'm showing you here is really how it communicates with your Alteryx server environment. So if you look here, the Alteryx server retains things like the Mongo database, rather, that's embedded within your Alteryx server, maintains things like your configurations, your workflow information, your different versions. What Wham does is actually pulls from there, parses that information into rich XML, and then allows it to be indexed and allows you to generate a multitude of report types off of that. It also is going to allow you to make changes on a large scale. Now, that's not made at the Mongo database level to preserve integrity. Those changes are actually pushed out to the server via the Alteryx API. And as partners with Alteryx, we make sure that we're always operating with the latest evolution of server, and that we're always able to connect to the latest versions of the API. But ultimately, this sits between your different Alteryx server environments, and allows you to interact with it. So I'm going to basically take us now into the fun part, which is actually walking through Workflow Admin Manager, or WAM. And for the record, it has nothing to do with the musical group Wham, in case you were wondering. Unfortunately, I'm a big George Michael fan.
Well, I dated myself the other day, by the way, and said that was the first concert I ever went to. So.
Honestly,
now I feel bad that I just said it again. So.
I did it again, but much respect.
And hey, Sean, before we get too far into it, this is Christina, the director of product, by the way. I did want to mention, if you all have any questions as Sean is going through it, feel free to put the questions in the Q&A section of the chat, and I'm happy to help go through those.
Yeah, and if there's anything that we think might be relevant for everyone to hear, Christina, feel free to interject, and I can answer it on a broader scale. And if we don't get to it during the session, I'll try to save a little bit of time at the end for us to circle back.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, just to orient everybody on what you're looking at now, this is the user interface of Workflow Admin Manager, or WAM. On the left-hand side, you'll notice you have a option here, says, your primary gallery. This is essentially what environment you're looking at. So do I want to look at my demo environment, my production environment? Basically WAM allows you to, talk to all your different environments from this one space. I'm going to leave it on my demo environment. And then this list right here represents your list of workflows. You can see that I have about 803 workflows in this sort of demo environment we have here. But I don't have to boil the ocean here. If I want to look at all of the workflows, great. If I want to narrow it down to a subset of workflows. So let's say I want to look at workflows that belong to a specific collection or a specific owner. Let's say somebody left the organization and you want to, filter to just their workflows, or apply some sort of logic to workflows that are in a particular collection. You can narrow the scope of what you're looking at and what you're editing. I'm going to go ahead and leave it here because I have it set to just view just my workflows, just the ones I own, so I can edit them without any concerns. That'll be messing up anybody else's work. But this side is going to represent your workflows, while over here you'll notice you have a menu of different functional options here, all of which are designed to help you get a pulse on what's going on within your environment, but also allow you to interact with, engage, and make critical updates. You'll notice just this view, it kind of defaults to some key metrics about your workflows and about the workflows within your server. So things like uploads per month, runs per month, are there users that haven't run any workflows in the last 30, 60, 90 days? Are there workflows that haven't been run in a long period of time? If I pop over here to top metrics, you see things like how many workflows are using a particular data source, and like which data sources are getting the most usage, and which workflows maybe aren't part of a collection. Maybe you want to make sure and ensure that everybody has their workflows in a collection rather than sitting in their shared to a collection rather than sitting in their private studio. And one of the things you'll notice right out of the gate is this little blue button here. It's a comprehensive health check. So you may be familiar with some of the health checks that Alteryx runs in the past, where you're able to get a view of your health of your server, and you'll be able to see things like usage. Well, this is actually a report you can get with that single click here from Wham. And when I click it, I have the option of selecting PDF, Excel file. I think PDF's a little prettier, so I went with PDF, but this is my one-touch health checkup. So this is going to be able to provide me with, a lot of those key metrics that I may want to know, as far as just assessing the health of my gallery or my server. You can see I have, 61 different users, 54 active, 7 inactive. How many total assets do I have on there? How many workflows, macros, apps? If I have things that are inactive, I can look at them and see how I want to handle them. I'd be able to see things like the heat maps. So if there's certain times of day where there's a large number of workflows scheduled or scheduled jobs, I could look at this and identify like what workflows are being scheduled at those times and maybe stagger them. I'm going to see who has access to different collections and so on. So I've got a pretty comprehensive view of just the overall health of my server environment, and I can do all that without, necessarily having to run a traditional health check, and more just using the single touch button here. The other thing you'll notice here on this within this health metrics section is the Alteryx monitoring. Now, I don't have anything super amazing to show you here as far as our environment, but this, you may decide, I want to be able to set up a monitor to monitor the service of, my gallery, and then maybe I want it to generate an alert if the service goes down. So if you've ever had gallery go down, the service drop, and then you had to wait for somebody to come tell you, hey, it's broken, or the gallery's not working, you can actually set up alerts to alert you when that happens using the Alteryx monitoring option here. Now, reporting this one is a big one. And one of the things I should mention is that the idea of this product, or the genesis of this product, came from voice of customer. As a consultancy, we worked with a lot of different Alteryx customers, and a lot of them have, compliance requirements. They, either have a need to generate audit documentation or document their workflows for either a third party or even just for change management. So maybe you want to create documents that give somebody sort of a breakdown of a workflow so that they have an understanding, because maybe they have to now take over and own it. That's where the audit report comes in real handy. You'll see there's a lot of different options I can select as far as what I want to include in my audit report. I can run the report ad hoc, and this is going to be based on what I have selected here. So I can select the whole universe of workflows and generate audit reports for all of them, or just maybe select each one as a one-off, run it, or set a schedule to where these are generated on a reoccurring basis. I'm going to show you one right now. If I ran the report and I opened up one of the audit reports for a particular workflow, this one is a account balance reconciliation workflow. Right out of the gate here, I can see that the owner of this is Travis. There's been 3 versions of it. If in this case, he's basically the different owner of the different versions. So, but if there were other authors that came in and edited the different versions, you'd see their names as well. And then I'm going to take you into just some of the benefits of the audit report. First thing, you'll notice here, and this should look familiar if you've ever developed an Alteryx workflow. This is a diagram of this particular workflow. It's going to lay out the workflow logic. It's going to have all the different tools represented here. You'll be able to see things, between the different relationships of these tools. Like, I noticed that here we're summarizing the information by the GL field. And then here I'm joining this data set based on, these different variables. So you'd be able to see, like, these would be the 3 fields in the left data set. These are 3 fields in the right data set that I'm joining on. I can see what, essentially what this formula represents. So now I have a diagram that, one, works as a good, audit diagram, but also works good for change management when you hand this over to somebody, or basically hand these assets over to somebody, like a workflow has a new owner. They have this as a, sort of representation of what the workflow is doing. And it's a little easier than taking screenshots of the workflow itself. Now, if your workflows do require auditing, the tool count by category, I would say, is useful in helping understand just the composition of the workflow. So one of the things I'm noticing here is that there's a good number of developer tools here. I see that this workflow is using the download tool, it's using a JSON parse. That means to me that it's probably pulling information from an API. So if I'm going to audit this, or if I'm going to be the one who's now owning this, I know that it requires some specialized skill set. I need to know a thing or two about APIs. One of the fan favorites here, one that customers really love here as part of the audit report, is the recommendations. So you'll notice this line here that says efficiency score 78. What WAM actually does is looks at the workflows and makes a determination. Are these workflows optimized? Are they running the best they could? And it offers actually solutions to help improve that. So in this case, you'll see from this workflow, it says consider disabling browse tools before you publish to reduce unnecessary processing. Browse tools are a very memory heavy and intensive tool. It caches all the data, and really it's great for visualizing the data, but you want to take those out before you put a workflow into production. So that's a great piece of advice there. Again, the auto field tool, it's a more complicated tool than the select tool. It again requires a little bit more memory, a little bit more processing. You might as well just switch over to the select, be a lighter tool and require less resources. And then finally, hey, your workflow doesn't have a where clause in the statement. Maybe you need to put a where clause in there so you're not pulling the entire table into the workflow unnecessarily. So you'll be able to save some resources. So here's a couple, directional things I can do to just streamline my workflow and make it better. And what we've seen in the past is organizations, let's say they have a sandbox, like an Alteryx server sandbox in a production environment. We've seen customers that will actually use this score as a means or basically a gate to then promote those workflows. So you have to hit a efficiency score of 95 minimum in order to promote it, to help with the performance of the workflows on the server. A couple other things that the audit report will offer, a summary of all your inputs and outputs, what data files are you using, and then it'll document the relationship between each of the different tools. So it gets pretty granular. I can see what's happening between this tool and this tool, what the connection is, what are the fields coming out of this relationship, and so on. And if I'm, new to any of these tools, like, I may know all of the favorite tools, but if there's ever a tool in here that I'm not familiar with this one, there's hyperlinks to the actual help documentation for Alteryx, where if I click on this will take me to the help documentation for the input tool. So very robust reporting on each of the individual workflows, and a great way to just track the workflows, what's happening in them, how can they be more efficient, and so on. Now, these are my list of workflows, and I could have it be, just my little list of workflows, or again, the whole universe of workflows. But maybe I want to see what data sources all these workflows are using, right? That's something that I think is a concern for, a lot of either database administrators, or, if you are responsible for governance, you want to know what data people are using in the right data. So with all of these selected, I can actually run a data sources check. And you'll see it loaded the data sources for my different workflows. And it will ask me to select, the different output types. I'm going to go ahead and select these. And if I run this report, I'll be presented with an Excel file in this case, because I'm getting both, but I prefer the Excel file because it breaks everything up into 3 tabs. And you'll see, of those workflows, here are my file connections. These are all the flat files I'm connecting to, whether it's whether I'm inputting or outputting to it. What's the file name? What's the file path? What sheet is it on? So line of sight into, those flat files that I'm using. As I click over here onto the database connections, this will be really all the workflows I have that are using a database as their data source. Right here, you're seeing an alias. This represents if you're using the data connection manager. So this is a data connection manager based connection string. That's why I'm seeing an alias here. But if it was just a straight database connection, I'd be able to see the connection string. And I can look through here and see, like, well, are these 3 are using the proper production data source, and maybe this one right here is using the old one, the database that we sunset. So it's using the same table, but from maybe the wrong database. And so that's something I can even change or update from the WAM interface, and I'll show you in a little bit how that might work. It's also going to provide any of the URL connections I have. So I know one of the workflows is actually pulling from an API, and it's showing me the URL here. So I know which URL it's tapping into. Now, I'm gonna hop over here to the paginated reports. One of the great things about Wham is all the different reporting options you have. So there's a lot of things you may want to explore with regards to, how people are using the workflows and just what workflows are out there. I would say the Mongo database retains sort of the workflow history, and then paginated reports can kind of serve those up to you in useful reports. So if you want to take a look at the job history detail for all of these workflows, I could get a historical report on their runs, who ran them, whether they were a success or failure. That comes in handy quite a bit. There's quite a few here, and I'll maybe just touch on some of the more popular ones. You'll see, scheduling details, like what schedules were created, what schedules we have. One, workflows by data source. So if you wanted to run a report, select a specific data source, and then it'll show you a list of all the workflows using that data source. Sort of similar to the report I just showed you, but you're working from the data source to the workflows instead of the workflows to the data source. Another big one, and this comes up a lot, so I'll spend a second on this one, is the version changes report. So in any situation where you have people that are auditing your critical business processes, and you have to know and you have to be able to provide information about what changes happen between different versions, this is a great one to use. I'll actually show an example of that one here. So let's say, you audit, or you have a third-party auditor that wants to take a look at this particular, ADA compliance tracking workflow and understand, how many versions there's been, what are the changes that happen between different versions. You can see on this landing page, it's telling me there's been 3 versions of this. Each of the versions have been edited by the same person, Brian Clausen, and then here are the dates where the changes were made. Now, as I scroll down, I can actually see the specifics of what changes were made. So I can see that from version 1 to version 2, there's been a couple, file-based changes. And actually, let me zoom in here and give you guys a better look, right? So this is the current value of this input output tool. Now this is the previous value. This is what it was. And I can see there was a couple different file source changes. And then as I get even further down, I see what tools were added to this workflow. So between version 1 and version 2, I can see they added a run command tool. So they're getting a little bit more sophisticated with their workflow. They added a text input, an output tool, another input tool, an append field. And so I can see everything from all the changes and adds from version 1 to version 2. And now I can even see the changes made from version 2 to version 3. And in this case, it looks like they just changed this data source that was, it looks like it was referencing a sort of packaged up CSV file. And then the workflow has been updated to actually point directly at the file folder versus using a packaged up work file. So it's going to actually reach out to the live document. So from there, I can tell, hey, what's changed from version 1 to version 2, and it's all basically given to me by the click of a button. And you can even favorite these, so that way, your favorite reports can roll to the top. Some people, like that audit report, but maybe it's, you want to look at designer usage details, things like that. You can move those to the top. Now, one of the things I talked about before was data sources. And I mentioned, you have the ability here from Wham to be able to look at your different environments. As I move over here to the search and update section, I'll stress this is a highly powerful feature. I'll give you an example. We had a customer that thought like they had several thousand, like in the area of tens of thousands of workflows on their server environment, in their gallery, and they were making a change in data lakes. They were sunsetting one data lake and converting over to the other, and their plan was for all the workflows using that old data lake, have a developer come in and make changes to, hire a team of developers come in and make changes to the data connections of thousands of workflows. Whereas with Wham, you can actually do all that from this single pane of glass. So I'll show you right here. Right now I have it set on the search option, and this would be great. There's a lot of functionality here in this search. If I wanted to search, maybe I just want to look for what workflows out of all of my workflows are using a specific tool, a connector, like a connector gets sunset, or there's a new version of a connector and you want to see what workflows are using it. I can use that search tool as well. I can search, exactly as the word is, or I can use even just regular expression to even search for patterns. But it starts to become more powerful when you start using the replace option. So what this is going to do, and let me just to help illustrate my example, I'm going to go back to my data connections here. So as I said before, maybe I noticed that this data connection is wrong, and these 3 workflows are using the old connection string, and I want to replace it with a new connection string. Well, I can actually use the search to, let me just paste that in there, search which of the workflows are using this old connection string. Maybe I want to now take those workflows here. Now you'll see I've got 3 that have popped up here, and I can actually put in the new connection string and hit update and make those changes via the update workflows option here. If, let's say, instead of looking for a connection string, there's a lot of different things you might want to actually change. Instead of looking for a data source, maybe there's workflows that are using a calculation or expression that is going to change, like maybe how you calculate ACV or some other business metric is going to change. Well, I can put the expression in here and actually get a little bit more specific. So if I want to say, I want to search for that specifically in the formula tool, and within the formula tool, I want to search for it within the expression. I can actually do a search for this expression within the formula tools in the expressions and replace it with this one. Now, when you're making changes to workflows, you can change the workflow as is, and basically you're going to generate a new version, but it'll still be the same workflow. But maybe you want to distinguish between the different workflows. So for example, if I'm using this find and replace, to help with my migration of workflows from my sandbox environment to my production environment, I can actually, like maybe just add, if I do a find and replace on the connection string and it's using a dev database connection, and I want to replace it with the production database connection before I migrate it to the production environment. What I can actually do is add, instead of just changing the workflow itself, I can add to the end of the file name, like ready for production, right? Instead of editing that one, I'm going to create a new one that has the new data source connection, type in ready for production, And then I'll be able to actually search for it here in the list of workflows. I can filter to any workflow that has like underscore ready for production, and then use the migrate feature to then migrate it, which I'll touch on in just a second. If you're now this, what you're seeing here is I'm kind of doing this in a little bit of a one-off, select this, make this change, whatever have you. If you want to do mass changes on a mass scale, that's where the mass upload tool comes in handy. So if I, hit this download dictionary, and I'll give you just open up just an example of one, I can actually lay out all the changes that I want to make. Here we go. So I can, here on the find and replace map, there'll be some instructions here, file format settings, whatever have you, but here on the find and replace map, I can actually set up all the changes that I want to make for all the different workflows, and then actually load those changes in mass by uploading the data dictionary. Now, I want to touch on migration. And there's two types of migration to think about. There's ownership migration, which I'll get to in a second, but also workflow migration, which is probably the one that people think of the most. So I already showed you how you can search for particular workflows that you maybe want to then migrate to so let's say these are just the workflows within my dev environment. I filtered to all of the ones that said that they were ready for production. I selected all of them, and then I want to migrate them from my demo environment to my production environment. And then I want to say, what collection I want to put them in. And then I can migrate them. So that makes, migrating workflows very simple between two different environments. I may also want to migrate ownership. So sometimes this happens, someone leaves an organization or they change roles, and then there's a bunch of workflows that are attached to them as the owner, or they're sitting in their collection. And as a gallery admin, there's a struggle there. Like, one, you can't delete them from, you can't delete anybody from your group of users, but you do need to make sure that all the active workflows that are out there on your gallery are assigned to somebody. Somebody's managing them, somebody's taking care of them. Maybe you want to take care of them yourself, or migrate ownership over to yourself until there's a new owner. Well, that's when you can actually use the ownership migration. So like now these workflows, they all belong to me. I have filtered this. I filtered this drop down to all the workflows that me, Sean owns. And now I want to migrate them over to, let's say I want to make Christina the owner, and I want to send them to, the admin admin collection. I can then migrate those over. And I can even get a little bit more granular with the mapped migration, where I can add a little bit more granularity into how I migrate these workflows. So a lot of ways to make your life easier as an administrator. Schedules. Some of this, I think some of this functionality you might see out on the admin page of the gallery, but some of this is incremental to that. So you'll see down here, and I can just refresh my schedules, make sure it's always showing, the latest group of schedules I have here. You see, it doesn't take very long. I can look at it by month, by day, by hour. Now, traditionally, if I want to create a schedule, I've got to go, schedule workflow. I've got to go out to the gallery interface and find that workflow and schedule it. But from here, I can actually just schedule a workflow from this interface. So if I click here, I can add a workflow here, and then set up a new schedule. I won't do that right now, but I can also set up a maintenance window. So let's say I want to set up a window of time right here on the gallery where I'm going to maybe take down the service, perform some maintenance, and then that way, if I set up that service window, any of the jobs that were going to run during that time would basically be paused until the service starts back up. So I have some options there. I can export my entire list of schedules. Where this comes in handy is if you just want to review schedules and see if there's ones where, maybe there's duplicative schedules, or, we've even seen organizations where they don't allow people to perform like hourly scheduled jobs, or use the setting to schedule their jobs to run every hour. So instead they make a bunch of individual schedules to have it run on every single hour. You'd be able to see things like that within the list that you export. And then kind of one of the things I mentioned before, the heat map. So, I'll give you an example. You're starting to hear people talk about queuing issues. My job's spending a lot of time in queue. We're not getting the kind of throughput we want at certain times of the day. The heat map is going to give you line of sight into those pockets of time where, you've got a whole lot of jobs scheduled. So as I look at this, I see during this time frame, looks like we got 67 schedules running within this 1 hour on Fridays. Maybe that's something we should visit. Maybe we should look at staggering the schedules. Maybe I should look at all these jobs and make sure that, they're all actually mission critical. Or, if I do some investigation, I can take a look at the history of the workflows running during this time. If they all take about 10 seconds to run, maybe it's not an issue. So um, I think that's a great view to have. And then orchestration. Hop over here. So with orchestration, this is going to allow you to chain processes together. So traditionally, how we would see people do orchestration is they would make use of the runner macro. So they would embed the runner macro in their workflow, and then have that workflow, once it runs, trigger a process with another workflow. Or, I'll give you another example. Imagine you have a workflow that essentially creates or generates a data set that it gets used by other workflows, right? So first one generates a data set, and then I have other workflows that then need to run using the data set created by the primary one. Well, in the past, either you would use that crew runner macro, or you would just try to schedule your workflows in succession with one another. So once the first one, runs, it probably, hopefully ends by this time, and then I'll have the other one scheduled. Well, using the orchestration option here, you can actually just set those up and chain your processes together. So I'm going to hit add workflow. You'll see sales forecasting. That's really the collection that the workflow, I can look into the collection, find the workflow I want. I'm going to leave that one as sales forecasting. I want to use a workflow created by Jessica Thomas, and this is the one I want. This is going to be the workflow that generates my data set. So I'm going to go ahead and expand it here. And so you'll see this represents one of my workflows. Now I want to add another workflow, because once this one runs, I want it to now kick off other processes. So I might go to a different collection and find one of the workflows that uses the data set created by this one. I'll add that workflow. And then what I can say is, once this one runs successfully, I'm going to go ahead and have it kick off this workflow and maybe another workflow. Or maybe I want it to kick off a workflow or process when it doesn't run successfully. So let's say it fails and it doesn't run successfully. I may want it to, again, kick off a different operation. And then I can have some options up here at the top that allow me to, notify the users whether it was successful, notify the users whether the, workflow failed. And then you have those notifications like letting you know and keeping you informed on just the success of these sort of chain processes. And kind of the last thing I want to touch on here is the palette. So where this comes in handy, and I could set load a template here, but where the palette comes in handy is if, you have certain standards within your workflow. Let's say, every workflow that belongs to this department needs, this comment box embedded in it. Or you want to put like notations in the workflow so the next time somebody opens it, they're there for them. So maybe you want to take all of your workflows that you've seen that have like poor annotation, poor documentation in it, and then you want to load a template into all of those workflows so that when the owner opens it up and they look in the canvas, there's actually instructions embedded in there from you that say, here are the things you need to do to get this, workflow up to date and current, and enforce those on all the different workflows that you have selected. So I kind of walk you through here just a breadth of functionality, and I think that kind of the takeaway here is, you're going to be able to, from the WAM interface, you're going to be able to do things like, you get your arms around just what's going on, from the health metrics here, what's going on within your workflow. What are I can view some of the key metrics. Yeah, I can view like what's going on with my service and be able to view my service performance, get some really granular reporting, either from the audit report, which is going to create those documentations, again, that assist with, your change management, or if you're, working through a third-party editor, be able to view data sources of those, generate a lot of reports, be able to make changes on a mass scale, make migration changes, ownership changes. And the idea is that this is kind of all happening within sort of this one single pane of glass that allows you to sort of jump between your different environments.